everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields-Milburn.
And I'm Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
Well, I would say TK's in the studio, but he's not here today. He has a children's cold, and we didn't want everyone to get sick. Speaking of everyone, we got Malabama here today.
Hi, everybody.
We got the rest of our team as well. Coming up today on this free public minimal episode, we're joined by Wendy Smith, author of this book right here, Both and Thinking, a book that discusses embracing creative tensions to solve your toughest problems. Today, we're talking to a listener about inner conflict and the tension that is interwoven with that inner conflict when you're making big, life-altering decisions. We also have an outstanding lightning round, listener tip, and added value segment for you. You can check out the full 2-hour maximal edition of episode 364, where we answer 4 times the questions with Wendy, and we dive deep into several simple living segments. That private podcast episode is out right now at patreon.com/theminimalist. Your support keeps our podcast and YouTube channel 100% advertisement free because, say it with me, y'all,
Advertisements
suck. All right, let's get to our first question.
Hey there, Brian from Grand Rapids, Minnesota, and I am a thankful VIP patron. I'm looking for some guidance or potential strategies for helping shorten a cycle of inner conflict that I see repeat in my life over and over, but until now have not been able to step back and recognize. I'll use the latest example for me because it condensed what in other examples may take days, weeks, or months to transpire into less than an hour from start to finish. Last week, I visited a local restaurant I had never visited before to pick up some takeout food. And within the span of 2 minutes of trying to navigate this place, I walked in on both the kitchen staff and the woman's bathroom. It was a quick double hit of embarrassment that really frustrated me at a deep level. Herein lies my inner conflict cycle. Whenever I do something wrong or embarrassing, I immediately spike into some disgust and self-loathing, like, what the hell, dude? And a quick litany of other similar comments in my mind. Then I transition from those into a kiddie pool of shame, where I sit there until I'm pretty convinced of those untrue and hurtful comments. Then, finally, whether a quick cycle of inner conflict like this one, or more serious ones that could take me weeks or months or even years to work through, I make it to perspective and wisdom. So, in perspective and wisdom, I stepped out of the kiddie pool and spoke the truth that you're not an idiot, you had never been there before, the doors were not well marked, and you will definitely know your way around next time. All is well. Essentially, I crave the quick succession I had in this example, from event to laughing it off and moving on, and can't help but wonder if I could get better at this life hacking so that this inner conflict in more serious areas of my life could be overcome. Is there anything I can do to short circuit this cycle and get to perspective and wisdom so that I can see things as they actually are more quickly?
Now, Wendy, obviously there's conflict here, but it's certainly inner conflict and exclusively inner conflict. Although I think at some level, you could say every ounce of conflict is ultimately inner conflict, right? Because how he's reacting in a way that is bringing him shame or disgust, or he's feeling inadequate in the moment. He feels stupid. What an idiot. And there's a certain narrative we all tell ourselves, right? And sometimes it's, I'm such an idiot. Or other times it's, I'm awesome, right? And neither one of those are necessarily earned. It's just a story we tell ourselves. Now, in the book, you talk about tension and dilemma. This is a dilemma of his, for sure, that's causing some sort of tension in his life. So how do we unpack the wisdom that you have in the book with respect to dilemma and help Brian better understand where he goes from here?
Well, I love the question, Brian. Great example. Paradoxically, the way to let go of our difficult emotions is we have to start by accepting them. You guys have talked about this on the show before, that if we feel that immediate sense of embarrassment, it can lead to these long-standing vicious cycles. We feel embarrassed. We feel shame that we feel embarrassed. We want to let go of that difficult emotion, so we feel guilt that we can't let go of it. And then these difficult emotions have a strong hold on us. The alternative is that instead of trying to push them aside, move on quickly, we can move on by starting to accept them. So in the book, we talk about finding comfort in the discomfort. And what we mean by that is not ignore the discomfort, hide it under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist. It's acknowledging, recognizing, accepting the discomfort. And here, I am a big fan of Tara Brach. She is a Buddhist psychologist, and she talks about radical acceptance. And what she would say, and Brian, here's the short circuit, is to start with saying yes to all those emotions. Yes, I feel embarrassed. Yes, I feel shame. Yes, I feel a little guilty that I can't let. Yes. And it's through that yes that we can allow their stronghold to loosen on us and move forward.
Yeah. I love the learning how to live with it. I was talking to someone years ago, I have had like addiction problems in the past, and he was someone who was sober. And I asked him, I'm like, hey man, I really want to let go of this. Like, how can I let go of it? And he was like, well, that's the problem. He's like, you're going to have to live with it. There's no letting go. Right. And you have to like dance with it on a day-to-day basis and like learn how to, learn how to have those impulses in your life. And yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting to me because like the person that I treat the worst, it's me.
Right.
Like I would never call Josh an idiot. I would never call Malabama an idiot. But I look in the mirror all the time and I'm like, oh, you idiot. I can't believe you did that thing. And I have to catch myself when I'm talking to myself that way because I know it's not helping the situation. And it makes me think about in your book how y'all talk about these like groups of folks. I'm paraphrasing, so correct me where I'm like really off base here, Wendy. But basically one group was told, hey, you're a standout group.
Right. And
you have potential to really like have these crazy big growth spurts. And then the other group wasn't told anything. And there was nothing that that led to you telling the group this, except for this was the group that you told it to. That was it. And if I remember correctly, like there was a pretty high percentage of people in that group that just had that one little seed planted that actually were doing better in certain areas just because they were given that encouragement of, hey, you're someone who stands out. And when I was reading that, I'm like, oh, this is why mantras are so important.
Right.
Yeah.
Our mindsets matter. It's not, and it's our hearts and our mind. They have to work together. How we frame something matters. So that's important. I'm a huge fan of the Buddhist idea of not shooting the second arrow. Have you heard of this? So the Buddhist idea is that we feel pain, we don't have to engage in the suffering along with the pain. So the first arrow hits us, it's painful. But then we feel so anxious about standing in the way, and we make ourselves feel bad about the fact that we feel pain, that we exacerbate the suffering. So how can we acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the addiction, acknowledge the embarrassment, acknowledge the shame, acknowledge that we walked into the women's bathroom instead of the men's bathroom, honor it, but not let it expand and exponentially grow so that it defines how we go forward.
Yeah.
I think there's something here about intentions as well. Intentions aren't everything, but they certainly matter here. Like if he intended to sneak into the women's bathroom, that's different from, oh, I made a mistake. Of course, a mistake ceases to be a mistake once you've learned a lesson from it. And by the way, if you've done it once, you're probably not going to make that same mistake over and over and over unless you just choose to forget the lesson that you've learned, right? I'm also thinking about what Brian's saying here about the embarrassment. Yes, it's okay to get embarrassed, to acknowledge that emotion, like to pick it up, right? But then when we cling, I think this is what you're saying with the second arrow thing, when we cling to that embarrassment, it's much more difficult to let it go. How do you let go of something? You simply cease the clinging.
Right.
So you can see the embarrassment. Oh, I picked this up. I guess I can set it down now as well. And as you set it down more and more, and that's all that Brian's really looking to do. I don't have a how-to for you, but the deeper understanding here is everything that you've picked up, you can put down. And the sooner you see it for what it is, if I think I'm picking up my luggage and I look down, there's a snake in my hand, you don't need to tell me the 7 steps to let it go. I'm merely going to stop clinging immediately. I'm going to get it away from me as quickly as possible. The same thing is true with any of these other so-called negative emotions. They're not really bad emotions. They're merely data telling you something about the decisions or the actions that you've made and informing you how to make different decisions or actions in the future.
We have several colleagues working on this idea of emotional ambivalence, meaning we have these what we would seem as good and bad emotions happening at the same time. And that's what leads us to actually be more productive. So we have these emotions that we see as negative, embarrassment, shame, and from those are what we learn. We need those. And yet, if we hold on to that too tightly and not add in we can learn, we can engage, then we're stuck in this vicious cycle. But if we can say, oh, I learned I shouldn't walk into that bathroom because that's the wrong bathroom, and I felt shame or felt embarrassed, that's what led me to learn that, well, then we can use them productively. So our colleague Naomi Rothman at Lehigh talks about the value of emotional ambivalence, bringing these two types of emotions together to allow us to productively and creatively move forward.
Josh is very good at emotional ambivalence.
The nicest way anyone's ever called me apathetic.
You're welcome. Yeah, I don't know if this will work for Brian or not, but something that I use for myself is when I find myself being so negative, I start to think about how would I talk to a 5-year-old? Or how would I talk to the 5-year-old Ryan Nicodemus? And that kind of helps me get a little bit more compassion for myself. Just one little technique.
Yeah, I had a moment just this past week where I was starting into that downward emotional spiral. I was tired. Tired makes me feel a little grumpy. I got home. The dishes were in the sink. Dishes in the sink make me feel grumpy. Then they make me feel angry. Then I start to blame. Then I start to wonder where my kids and husband were to do the dishes in the sink. And I was about to spiral into something really negative. And I just paused, right? I just paused. I'm tired. Yes, I'm grumpy. Yes, this grumpiness makes me feel angry. Yes, I don't need to act on that. So it diffuses that negative emotion, gives us that pause, if you will. So we don't need to behave based on those negative emotions that lead to even more shame, guilt, anger, frustration in that downward spiral.
Yeah, we start to get into this should thinking.
Right.
These dishes should have been done. I shouldn't have to feel this way. And acknowledging it and being there are no shoulds. This is the way it is. That's a very ambivalent approach. It's not good or bad. It's just an observation. And I totally agree. It's a great way to kind of help diffuse things and calm it down a little bit.
Right. My kids were really happy that I did that too.
Our friend Dan Harris, who you all listeners know from our first documentary, Minimalism, he just put out a TED Talk. And he talks about the downward toilet spiral of emotions, right? But the counter to that is after you pause, there's also an upward spiral. And joy begets joy. Contentment begets contentment. Contribution begets contribution. Love begets love. Caring begets caring. And so it becomes infectious. Your negative emotions, so-called negative emotions, if you're raging or angry, yes, other people are going to feel that. They're going to sense that. But if you're joyous and you pause and you make room, because joy does have room for grief. It has room for sadness. It has room for discontent. It has room for confusion. If we have that pause, then we can have that upward spiral of beautiful emotions that are contagious for the people around us.
Yes.
Brian, I'd love to send you a copy of Both and Thinking by Wendy Smith and Marianne Lewis. And we'll put a link to the book in the show notes as well. Ryan, what time is it?
You know what time it is. It's time for the lightning round where we answer your text messages. You can text your questions and your comments to 937-202-4654.
Yes, indeed. Now, during the lightning round, Wendy, this is where we and our guests, we answer questions with a short, shareable, less than 140 character response. We put the text to these minimal maxims in the show notes so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media. You can find all of those minimal maxims over at theminimalists.com/podcast right there in the show notes. But really, you can wander on a bit. Professor Sean puts a minute on the clock for each of us and allows us to pontificate our pithy answer a little bit. We have a question today from Becky.
My mother-in-law and I have a strained relationship, but I know she is important to my son and my husband. How do you manage a difficult relationship with someone you can't cut out of your life?
You can throw 60 seconds on the clock for me, Prof. Sean. You know, TK was supposed to be here today, but he has the great Siberian itch. I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
It's an Alan Wattsism. So, but he did give us a pithy answer. I wanted to use his. I'm going to steal his for a second, then I'll give you mine. You can let something go without throwing it away.
Mm.
I would say the opposite is also true. You can throw something away and you haven't let it go in your heart.
Mm.
And the same is true with a relationship or an expectation or a demand of someone else. I need you to be this way.
Mm.
It's possible with our things to let it go, but still be holding on to it, cling to it. Or with our things, they can add value to our lives. They can be nice. I can have them around me, but I have let them go in the sense that I don't need them to live a fulfilled life. Here's one other thing I'll say to you. The closer you are to someone, the greater the chaos.
Mm.
I wish I had more time to unpack that one.
Perfect.
That was right at a minute. That was like to the microsecond.
Boom.
All right, Mahala, give me 60 seconds. Here's my pithy answer. Compassion conceives connection, or you could say compassion creates connection. Whatever version of alliteration you like. But here's the thing: is you don't have to agree with someone. You don't have to necessarily support someone or help someone or radically accept them to show them compassion. You can show compassion at any time. And that, I feel like that is the default emotion or the default action that will always at least help a situation not escalate. So for me, when I'm around family, when I'm around friends, if things start to escalate, I start to get a little annoyed. I hold my context of how can I show these people compassion in the moment? And that will always, I think that's always the right answer.
Wendy, before we throw some time on the clock for you, Becky's struggling here because there's an either or thing. And it's making that room for the compassion is important. Understanding the closer we get to someone, there is going to be some sort of chaos, right? I think that's inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
What do you have to say to Becky and her struggle here?
It's a version, Ryan, of what you said. And we don't need to agree, judge. We need to understand and respect. And I would start with just listen. There might be a whole bunch of reasons that there's tension with your mother-in-law. I can imagine exactly many of those. And great relationships are founded on trust, respect. The way to get to that trust and respect is to just listen. To what we all want in the world is people to listen to us. They don't have to agree with us, but to listen, to honor us. Just listen. I have a colleague in Pennsylvania, Sharon Browning, who talks about just listening. Listening is an act of justice. How can you start out by creating more honor, respect, dignity in that relationship by listening?
Oh, I love that.
And she did it within a minute.
She
How
did.
beautiful
That's
is
awesome.
that?
Nice.
Yeah, it's almost like listening is an act of compassion in a way too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's check in real quick with our Patreon live stream. Every Tuesday at 10 a.m., we check in with our video private podcast subscribers, and they ask us some questions and comment, and they interact with each other as well. You can find that at patreon.com/theminimalists. Alabama, what do you got for us?
I have a question here from Kate. She says, I have a paradox. I know I want to leave the job I have, but I don't. I'm conflicted internally about what I want to do next, but it's been 2 years now. Any thoughts?
Wendy, is this a paradox of comfort in a way? Because once upon a time, I was talking to Danny Unknown about this weekend. Ryan and I, when we were in the corporate world, it's not that I hated my job and I wanted to get out of here right away. It's like, oh, this is pretty comfortable. I'm pretty good at this. I'm pretty skilled at it. I am competent. And by the way, I'm getting these little food pellets of nutrition from the universe. They're telling me I'm special. I'm unique. I am who I am. In fact, when we meet someone, what do we say? what do you do? And I had an impressive answer to what do you do? I'm the director of operations for 150 retail stores. And I didn't really care about that, but I cared so much about what other people thought of me. I'm an Enneagram 3.
Yes.
And so that makes a lot of sense when I need to put on the mask to impress other people.
I mean,
right?
you still have a great answer to that question.
What do you do? I tie my shoes really quickly.
Right.
Which I would have really impressed my 7-year-old self. I was still doing Velcro at
I'm
7.
impressed.
But comfort was the problem. My life was sort of a 6 out of 10, and we're afraid of losing that comfort, and therefore not ever experiencing the real discomfort that encourages us to make the change that may be more beneficial, more rewarding for us in a not too distant future.
This is the rabbit hole. This is the vicious cycle that we get when we emphasize one piece of something and don't let ourselves see the alternative. So we've emphasized, and it's exactly all the reasons you just said. We emphasize our expertise. We continue to rely on our expertise. We continue to rely on our identities. It becomes inertia. And all of a sudden, our expertise, the great things that it was offering us, shackle us instead of enable us. And that's when we start falling down that rabbit hole. We get stuck until we can't get out. And until we get into these really tragic situations or really difficult situations that foist us out because we have no alternative but to, that's the only alternative. And so that's the vicious cycle of the rabbit hole. The question is, how do we not go down the rabbit hole in the first place? There's some great research, Eric Dane, of competence traps. Our competencies, our expertise as individuals, if everything is if I have a hammer, everything is a nail. We get stuck and we can't see the other possibilities.
Yeah. It's this question really resonates with me because, Josh and I were both at that point where we were kind of at a boiling point. We had to get out. And I really wish I would have. And I did to an extent. I mean, I got laid off, but about a year before I got laid off, I started simplifying and paying down debt and really kind of preparing to leave my job. Now, nothing could have prepared me for being laid off when I was, but at least I started doing something because when I did get laid off, I was like, oh, okay, I was going to leave anyway. I mean, now I'm just kind of forced out of it. But, I guess, and I don't have an answer to this, but I do hate to see when people are kind of in this situation, they said they've been 2 years with this mindset. And if you let it go another 2 years, it's going to be 10 times worse. The feeling's going to be 10 times worse. So yeah, I mean, it's a matter of altering kind of the way that you're perceiving this job. But I don't have an answer to this, but I don't want to see it get to a boiling point for the person who asked this question.
Here's something else we find in the work that we do and the workshops that we do is that when we invite people, so the both and here is how do you take advantage of all your experience, all your expertise, all the things that you've built up and try something new and experiment and be creative. How do you deal with that? What we find in the workshops that we do is that it is so much harder to find our own both ands and so much easier to find other people's both ands.
Right.
And so in our workshops, we invite people to think about their own tensions, their own dilemmas, then think about something else more creative, somebody else's both and. They can totally easily do that. And then we invite them back to their own. But instead of inviting them back to their own and having them come up with their own solutions, we say pair and share. Tell somebody else next to you and have them be open to what they have to say. And the aha here is getting out of our own heads. And whether that's a paid professional therapist or a best friend or an accountability partner or somebody else who you trust to explore your both and who you're not going to reject and defend against, that's an opportunity to help you think about new possibilities.
Yeah. The one thing that held me back from leaving the job was money, right? We have to pay our bills.
Yeah.
And for me, I was living paycheck to paycheck. In fact, I was living in a deficit each month. No matter what my paycheck was, I was spending more on credit cards than what I was making. And what I did is I changed those habits, and then I saved up I got to about 3 months of savings, and then I got laid off. And I'm like, oh no. I was hoping to get 6 months so I could have 6 months to kind of figure things out, try new things. But because I was forced into it, I'm like, okay, if I sell my car right now, if I move out of my house right now and rent it out, and if I go to this smaller apartment and get rid of my car payment, I can make that 3 months, 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's just one little ingredient that I used. And I hope that I hope that resonates with you somehow, but I'm sure money is like one of the biggest things holding back this person from quitting.
And Ryan, I'll just say quickly, the money is partially the reality of the money, and it's also the fear, the emotions.
Yeah.
And navigating these tensions, we talk about 4 buckets of things that have to happen all together in a system. And 2 of those are changing our mindsets, as we said earlier, our head, but also noticing our emotions, the head and the heart. They both have to be aligned, or we have to attend to both of them.
It's a great point.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wendy Smith.
Yes. Thank you, Wendy.
I want to encourage you to check out the book. It's called Both and Thinking. I'll hold it up if you're watching the video version of the podcast. Ryan and I got a lot more to talk about. We're going to do a little house tour. I got this article about retail therapy and how it's really increasing lately, post-pandemic. We'll talk about that. We've got some other simple living segments as well. But first, Alabama, what do you got for us?
Here's a minimalist insight from one of our listeners.
Hey, Josh and Ryan. My name is Jenny, and I'm calling from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, with 2 useful tips. We have a local service called Waste Not LLC, and it's a compost service. What they do is they give you a bucket that you can fill up with compostable items, and once a week they come and pick it up right from your doorstep, and they compost it while working with local farms. Our family loves to collect compostable items. Our kids are even involved with it too, and we've explained the process and how composting helps our planet with our 2 young kids. So this is a great service that they do the work for you for a small cost, and you actually get to assist with local farms. My second tip is for baby care. It's an organization that is within our local food bank here in Sheboygan, and I know that there are other organizations such as this in other cities. What they do is they collect all baby items, anything from formula to clothes, diapers, any baby-related items, and they give it to families that are in need. Instead of keeping clothes that no longer fit our kids or diapers that they have grown out of or just any other things related to kids, we have chosen to donate them, and we see it as helping other kids in our community. So rather than them collecting dust on a shelf or in a container, we see them as an opportunity to help others in need.
Let's return to the public version of the podcast real quick. Ryan, I got a great added value segment for you, something way out of left field. Before we get to that, real quick, for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the minimalist, or should I say 4 things going on in the life of the minimalist, or maybe it's just one thing. It's TikTok. We were talking about this on the private podcast earlier, but we have 4 different ways to simplify or maybe enhance, amplify your TikTok feed. There's 4 different accounts. Of course, you could follow the Minimalists on TikTok. We're just at the Minimalists. You can follow my writing class on TikTok, How to Write Better, if you want different writing tips and writing insights. We have How to Love, my wife's podcast, so you relationship insights. And then if you really want some beauty in your life, minimalist design, minimalist architecture, minimalist well-being, you can follow our side project. It's called Minimalism Life, and it's just at minimalism on TikTok. We'll put a link to all of those in the show notes. But if you're on TikTok and you're looking to enhance your TikTok feed, you can follow the Minimalists, you can follow How to Write Better, you can follow How to Love, and you can follow at Minimalism. For our added value segment this week, Ryan, I have a towel.
Nice. Awesome.
This towel adds value to my life.
Cool.
Goodbye, everybody. So here's the thing, Ryan. I have had the same beach towels since we lived in Montana, which I didn't have to use very frequently in Montana, strangely. Occasionally we'd go up to Flathead Lake and I would need some sort of towel. But Ella hated our towels. They were too thin. They were old. They were falling apart. Yeah. And she kept saying, oh, I want a different towel. And eventually I'm like, okay, we've had these towels forever. They're tattered. They're falling apart. They're a decade old. We need to do something else with our towels. Like the towels were older than Ella. And so I started researching, trying to find A, a towel that works really well, but B, one that didn't break the bank. Yeah. And I found it. It's called, I don't know, Exclusivo. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. Ryan, you can check it out here. I'll put it up on the screen. You can wrap yourself in it, Ryan.
I can attest. It is very soft.
And here's what I'll say. I got this off of Amazon. I looked at the reviews. The reviews were awesome. And it comes in a bunch of different colors as well. So right now, Jordan, through his own magic on the screen, he's going to put up, it comes in green, and it comes in pink, And it comes in blue. He's a real wizard. Am I allowed to say wizard?
I think
magic person. I believe that's the politically correct term.
Yes. All of the wizards will be happy that you use that politically correct term.
So I'm not encouraging you to go get brand new towels if you don't need them. But if you're looking, I spent so much time researching these towels, the Exclusivo. And by the way, this is obviously not an ad. It's a 100% cotton, super absorbent, soft, plush, oversized 35 by 70 Cabana stripe beach towel.
This totally sounds like an ad.
It does.
It's great.
No, so use promo code. See, not an ad.
To be charged twice as much.
Yeah.
I will say one thing, Milburn, that I really appreciate about you is that because you do have such, you pay such close attention to detail. Like if I need to replace something, like I have a vacuum that, Mariah and I have had for 9 years and it is falling apart.
Yes.
And I see that you have one that's different than the one that I have. So like I can be like, oh, how does that work? And like I know that you've gone out of your way to like get something of quality. So with the beach towels, yeah, that's a great recommendation. Mariah and I went out and got, so we were at, I could probably talk about this is a private podcast, right? No, we're back on the public one. It doesn't matter. We were at someone's house that we were doing an interview, a podcast with in Portland, Oregon, and they had these context towels, cotton towels. And it was like, I was drying my hands. I'm like, oh my goodness, like these are the softest, this is like the softest towel I've ever felt in my life. And then I went to go look it up and they were like $300 something a towel. And I'm like, oh, I'm not spending $300 on a towel. But I did find a substitute. Anyway, long story short, a good soft towel is like a game changer, man.
And this,
total game changer.
This is relatively inexpensive. I'll also say this, you have to wash it twice because there's a lot of lint you have to get out of it the first two washings. By the way, Ryan, we got a bunch more surprise questions on the private podcast this week. Like, what is the once a month rule? What is the most disappointing advertisement that we have ever heard? And man, were we disappointed. How do I choose between starting my dream career and starting a family? Plus a million more questions for Wendy and the Minimalists. And if they want to hear all that in Alabama, tell them what to do.
Check out the Minimalists private podcast. Visit patreon.com/theminimalists or click the link in the description to subscribe and get your personal link so that our weekly Maximal episodes play in your favorite podcast app. You'll also gain immediate access to all of our archives, recordings of live events, weekly home tours, and our private community of thousands of open-minded minimizers like you. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. If you have a question or listener tip for our podcast, give us a call, 406-219-7839, or email a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. Follow The Minimalists on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter @The Minimalists. And to get our podcast show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list at theminimalists.com.
Thank you, Malabama. That is our show for today. On behalf of Ryan Nicodemus, TK Coleman, Malabama, Podcast Sean, Jordan O'More, Professor Sean, Social Jess, Danny Unknown, Post-Production Peter, Emma the Immigrant, and the rest of our team, I'm Joshua Fields Milburn, reminding you to love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
Every little thing you think that you need, every little thing you think that you need, every little thing that's just feeding your greed. Oh, I bet that you'd be fine without it.